Why do people still say that Jesus is God? It just doesn't make sense.
The person in this video cites a chapter of the Quran which has Allah asking Jesus on Judgment Day whether Jesus told people to worship him and his mother as gods, and Jesus says, no, how could I do that? That would be wrong. The original video then says, if Jesus never told people to worship him, why do they still say that he's God? Supposedly it makes no sense. First, this is a perfect example of how Muhammad got Christian theology wrong, as Christians don't worship Mary as a god. Second, Jesus does not have to explicitly say the words, worship me, for us to recognize that he is worthy of worship, nor does he have to say the words, I am God, for us to recognize he is divine. Jesus says things in Scripture that makes it explicitly clear both that he is God and that he is worthy of worship. Let's look at some examples of this. Isaiah 44:6 and Surah 57:3 say that God is the first and the last. So if Jesus claims to be the first and the last, that means he is claiming to be God. Revelations 1 verses 17 through 18, Jesus says he is the first and the last. Surah 3:135 says that only Allah can forgive sins, yet Jesus in Mark 2 forgives a crippled man's sins, and the Jews accuse him of blasphemy. And then to prove that he had the authority to forgive sins, Jesus heals the crippled man. We are told in Joel chapter 3 that it's God that will judge the nations. Psalms 9 says the same thing. Surah 22 says that Allah is the judge. Yet in Matthew 25:30 through 32, Jesus says he will sit on the throne and judge the nations. Similarly, in John 5:21 through 27, Jesus says that all judgment has been given to the Son, and that we are to honor the Son just as the Father is honored. In this verse, Jesus is saying he's to be honored just as the Father is honored, and if part of honoring the Father is worshiping him, then by simple reasoning, it follows that we are to worship the Son. Matthew 28:18, Jesus comes to them and says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Isaiah 48:11, God says he will not give his glory to another. Yet in John 17:5, Jesus says, and now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory that I had with you before the world existed. In Mark 2:28, Jesus says he is the Lord of the Sabbath. In John 8:58, Jesus refers to himself with the divine name, saying, before Abraham was, I am. John 16:15, Jesus says, all that the Father has is mine. Matthew 2:11, we see the wise men worshiping Jesus. Matthew 14:33, the disciples worship Jesus after he walks on water. Matthew 28:17 and Luke 24:52 tells us that the disciples worship Jesus after he was resurrected. Matthew 28:8 through 9, women worship Jesus after finding his tomb empty. In John 20 verse 28, the disciple Thomas refers to Jesus as my Lord and my God. It's worth noting that in Acts we see the apostles repeatedly rebuke people for worshiping them and say, no, you should only worship God. So they knew very well only God was worthy of worship. I'll conclude here with this. To my Muslim friends, you guys really need to get some better arguments.